Hi, I'm Nalevanko, and today I'm presenting on the topic of crisis pregnancy centers. Pregnant and alone, know your option reads billboards all across the United States. These billboards are posted by a nonprofit, faith-based organization called Crisis Pregnancy Centers. CPCs are anti-abortion organizations focused on dissuading pregnant women from choosing abortion. On January 22, 1973, the United States Supreme Court ruled abortion in the first 2 trimesters of pregnancy legal nationwide. This landmark decision acknowledged that the constitutional right to privacy, as Justice Harry Blackmun states, is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy. As of 2013, there are approximately 2,500 CPCs compared to 1,800 abortion clinics. CPCs have received over $30 million in governmental funding since 2001. The government's monetary support of openly religious, deceptive, and unlicensed crisis pregnancy centers poses a question. Should crisis pregnancy centers receive government funding in the United States? Research through medical, religious, and ethical lenses reveals that crisis pregnancy centers should not receive government funding. CPCs aim to advertise themselves as licensed medical clinics and offer women who arrive at these clinics medical misinformation about abortion and their pregnancy. CPCs should not receive government funding as they are not licensed medical clinics and offer false medical advice. The National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws, Pro-Choice America, a nonprofit organization that opposes restrictions on abortions, sent volunteers into 16 CPCs in Maryland to investigate the accuracy of the medical misinformation provided. The report showed that of the 16 centers investigated, 100% of the centers were found to be providing misinformation about abortion and birth control. 5 centers informed the volunteers that abortion is linked to breast cancer, and 1 center claimed abortion is linked to colon and uterine cancer. Susan, a patient of Dr. Ann Davis, an assistant professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, received an ultrasound at a CPC in Manhattan. However, volunteers were unable to determine how far along her pregnancy was. Repeated and delayed ultrasound pushed her pregnancy into the 3rd trimester. Although Susan was previously told by CPC counselors that she was legally permitted to have a 3rd trimester abortion, she was past the legal limit. Dr. Davis examined Susan and found an ultrasound performed by licensed nurses or doctors would have easily dated her pregnancy. Government money should not be used to fund organizations that blatantly provide medical misinformation. Affiliates from 2 main CPC organizations, CareNet, have been notorious for discussing religion to clients openly. Crisis pregnancy centers should not receive government funding because many are biased on the basis of religion. In Bose v. Deshu, a court opinion between Susan Bose, a woman who visited a CPC, and Dottie Deshu, a representative of the CPC Susan visited, Bose recounts how she mentioned to 2 unnamed CPC volunteers that she had previously received an abortion, and the volunteers questioned Bose about her religious affiliation. Kimberly Kelly, a sociologist at Mississippi State University who studied religion and reproductive politics, researched evangelical Christianity in the CPC movement. Kelly emphasizes the religious conversion of this religion and the aspect of converting others into evangelical Christians. CareNet, an evangelical Christian organization, uses our platform and affiliates to try and persuade clients to follow their religion. Kelly emphasizes the obvious religious influence in the CPC movement when she states the religious foundation of the Crisis Pregnancy Center movement are evident. To ensure further separation of church and state, government funding to CPC should cease. First-hand accounts of women seeking abortions who went into a CPC thinking it was an abortion clinic report feeling pressured into sustaining their pregnancy. CPCs should not receive government funding as they manipulate pregnant women who are seeking abortions into continuing their pregnancy. Alice Chen, a Juris Doctorate candidate from Cardozo School of Law, describes the plight of Amy Kay, who accidentally walked into a CPC that was intentionally located near the Planned Parenthood office. CPC volunteers encouraged her to sustain her pregnancy, saying, "I think you're going to be a really great mother," and asking, "Wouldn't your mother love to take care of this baby?" Amy became increasingly distraught, and volunteers used this vulnerability to encourage her to go through with her pregnancy. Edward Kessler, MBE, a renowned thinker in interfaith relations, described a method CPCs use to persuade women into sustaining their pregnancy. Most CPCs do not explicitly state that they do not perform abortions or offer referrals to clinics that offer abortions. Pregnant women who go to CPCs are not offered other resources and will only be exposed to pro-life ideals, and as Kessler states, this will lessen the opportunity to encounter and learn from those with different perspectives and opinions, and be exposed to other voices. Pregnant women who do not know all of their options will most likely choose to sustain their pregnancy, and is the only option they are familiar with. Although politicians and women who have visited CPCs have voiced their support for legislation that prevents clinics from deceiving and lying to women, these clinics and their supporters say they are legally allowed to mislead women. crisis pregnancy centers can give women biased and medically inaccurate information because the First Amendment protects their freedom of belief. In National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, NIFLA v. Becerra, NIFLA argued that requiring licensed clinics to provide clients with information about free and low-cost options like contraception and abortion, and requiring unlicensed clinics to inform clients about their unlicensed status violates free speech and free exercise rights under the First Amendment. In a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court sided with NIFLA and stated that the licensed and unlicensed notices unduly burden protected speech. Martin Luther King Jr., a leader in the civil rights movement, addresses this opposing viewpoint in a letter from Birmingham jail. Concerning the morality of laws, King states, "An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. Although the law protects CPCs, it is morally unjust to allow centers to give pregnant women medical misinformation, pressure them into religion, and mislead and emotionally manipulate women into sustaining their pregnancy." Carolyn Maloney, U.S. Representative from New York's 12th Congressional District, sponsored the Stop Deceptive Advertising for Women's Health Services Act to the House of Representatives in 2017. This bill will require the Federal Trade Commission, a federal organization intended to promote consumer protection, to implement rules that forbid a person from deceptively advertising to give the appearance that such person provides abortion services. A potential implication of the proposed solution is that this bill would eradicate deceptive advertising from CPCs and would allow women to have quicker and straightforward access to clinics that offer abortion services. One limitation to the solution is that CPCs would fight this bill and the proposed legislation would most likely not pass. The bill discussed in this solution was introduced in the House of Representatives in 2017, so it's highly likely this legislation will stay stagnant and other bills similar will not pass either. Alice Chen, a Juris Doctorate candidate from Cardozo School of Law, proposes that states shall require ultrasound technicians to be licensed or registered by certifying bodies such as the American Registry for Diagnostic Metal Sonography. One implication to the solution is that women will receive accurate, sufficient prenatal or reproductive information and care. Another implication is that CPCs would be subject to penalties for practicing medicine without a license. One limitation of the solution is that legislation requiring CPCs to be licensed would receive backlash as sonogram technicians do not have to be certified to operate the machine. It is evidence that CPCs offer medical misinformation concerning abortion, are rooted in religious pro-life ideals, and use tactics to persuade abortion-seeking women into sustaining their pregnancy or choosing adoption. Therefore, crisis pregnancy centers should not receive government funding. Thank you.
Lily, thanks. Okay, so for the first question, what information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research? Information
I needed was what CPCs are, what they do, and how they get federal funding, and also who researches them. In Henry Waxman's report, it allowed me to see what specific programs fund CPCs and how states are funding CPCs. And then in Dawn Stacy's article that I used, it allowed me to look at the history of CPCs, how they became so deeply rooted in religious and pro-life ideals, and the medical misinformation that they provide.
Okay, thanks. Second question. How did you use the conclusions and questions of others to advance your own research?
Well, many of my sources did not offer conclusions. They just simply stated the problems with CPCs, and my conclusion it basically substituted as their solution also, if that makes sense. And then a question that came up in my research was, are CPCs protected under the First Amendment to give pregnant women this misinformation? And then I looked into NIFLA v. Becerra, and this helped me form my counter-argument.
Okay. All right, thank you.